Hello, good evening. So we are this week Parshas Boy, or you call it in English Bow. And the Parsha of Boy is a Parsha which first of all is going to discuss the final plagues. You want a Chumash? You want to get a Chumash? It should be right there. Parsha's Boy is discussing the final three plagues, locusts, darkness, and the plague of the firstborn. This parsha is actually going to introduce the first mitzvah that the Jewish people were told before they left Mitzrayim, is the mitzvah to establish a Jewish calendar known as the lunar calendar versus the solar calendar, when the beginning of the month is when the moon appears. That's what makes it a chodesh. What the Hebrew word for new is chadash, and then what makes it into a new month. And that was the first mitzvah actually that we were given as a nation 2 weeks before the Exodus. Following that, we were given a bunch of orders how to celebrate the night of the Exodus even before we leave. It was the first Seder with paschal meat, with bitter herbs, with matzah. So people a lot of time speak about matzah, they only consider the matzah of rushing out of Egypt without enabling to have a chance to become leaven, to become bread. But really, there were two types of matzah. There was the premeditated made matzah, which was planned for it to be matzah and not bread, and it was eaten that evening before they left Egypt. In addition to that, there was the matzah, which became matzah by default, and this is when they were rushed out of Egypt. And even the original matzah is also related to the matzah of rushing out of Egypt, because as our sages tell us, God commanded us to eat matzah because a few hours later you're going to experience matzah. So it's all pre-planned and everything was arranged. And then comes a lot of mitzvahs already, which relates to the Exodus, the mitzvah of putting on tefillin, which in the tefillin boxes it mentions the fact that we left Egypt. That's one of the reasons that we put on tefillin every day, is to remind us and to place our heart. That's what the tefillin is, on our arm next to our hearts, and on the brain, on the head next to our brain, to direct our heart and to direct our mind to the idea that what? That God is a God who not only created the world, but he dominates it till today. And what is the proof of God's involvement in creation? It is the stories of miracle, which includes the story of the Exodus. So there's a lot of good stuff in this Parsha. Very important Parsha. If you read the Parsha carefully, like I always say, you can smell the Seder night, which is a very favorable smell to every single Jew. Everybody likes to be a part of a Seder, to sit and to enjoy and to have the questions and to eat and to drink and the 4 cups. This is the experience which unites us as people throughout Easter. What I'm going to discuss tonight is an interesting development in the nationality of the nation that we became.
Lost your sound, Rabbi.
And to commemorate when did they become a nation? When did they become a people? The Jewish people historically became a people of the night of the Exodus. Like God told Moses last week, "Velakachti etchem li la'am." I'm going to take you to me as a nation. But the prophet Ezekiel, when he talks about the Exodus, he writes, "Lovoi lokachas loi goy mikerev goy." That God came to take a nation out of the midst of a nation. There was the nation of Egypt, and he picked the Israelites to become his nation. So when we say, the people of God, when and at which point did we become the people of God? It wasn't Abraham, and it wasn't Isaac, and it wasn't even Jacob, and it wasn't their kids. They were individuals who recognized God, and that's what made them the people of God. But they were the ones who initiated that relationship. To be taken as a nation by God, that happened when we left Mitzrayim. So it's a birthday. So that's why everything which has to do with the Exodus of Egypt, our sages throughout the ages, our commentators, always try to find the very special qualities and insights into the story of the Exodus, because the story of the Exodus is a story of becoming a nation. So everything which relates and is a part of the Exodus is just another step in the development of becoming a nation, the birth of a nation, Am Israel. Now, what's interesting is that in this week's Parsha we discover that suddenly we are given a new title. Usually, when you read about the Jewish people in the last 2 weeks in Parsha Shmois, so what are we called? Even in this week's Parsha, if we go to the beginning of the Parsha, Hashem tells Paroi, okay, Hashem tells Moshe, come to Paroi, I hardened his heart, chapter 10, Gorsh, verse 1, verse 2. And what does it say on verse 3? Vayovoi Moshe ve'Aaron el Paroi. Moses and Aaron came to Pharaoh. Vayoimru Elov, and they said to him, Koi Omar Hashem Elekei Ivrim. This is what God, the God of the Hebrews, said. Ad Mosai Me'anto Le'onois Miponoi. How long will you refuse to humble yourself before me? Shalach Ami ve'yavduni. Sent Ami. What's Ami? Ami, my nation. Ami Israel. Sent my nation and they will serve me. So what are we called? What is our title? That's the name we got. We are called Ami, Am Israel. Right? We have later also verses which talks about we being the servants of God. Ki libre Yisrael avodim, you are my servants. Avodai eim asher oitzeisi oisom mieretz Mitzrayim, you are my servant who I had taken out from the land of Egypt. So we have a title. What is our title? Our title is servants, servants of God. Every year comes Rosh Hashanah. One of the opening statements is Avinu Malkeinu. What's Avinu? Our Father, because we are referred to in the book of Shemot even as the children of God, Bnei Israel, or Bnei Chori, my firstborn Israel, God said, right? We are a child. If we are a child, children, so God is our Father. Here we are called servants. You are servants, then I'm your king, Malkeinu. We are the people. Am, nation. But then we have a new title which is being repeated 3 times in this week's Parsha. First, you turn to chapter 12, verse 17. It talks about the holiday of Passover, matzah. So it says, Ushmartem et amatzot. You shall guard the unleavened bread. Okay? For the holiday that you eat unleavened bread, or you should guard the unleavened bread from becoming leavened. Ki be'etzem hayom hazeh. For on this very day, Otzeti, I took out es tzivotechem, your tzivot. Tzivot is from the same Hebrew word tzava. In English, they translate, I have taken out your legions. Shtota koya legions.
It means a multitude of people. Usually it's used in connection with military action.
Very good. Military. And that's why also in Hebrew, what is the Hebrew word for army? Tzava. Tzava. Tzava is the very same word we have over here, legion. Tzivotechem. We are called the legion, the army. I took out the army. We are called suddenly soldiers of an army. Not children. It doesn't say I took out my nation. It doesn't say I took out my servants. It doesn't say I took out my children. Otzeti et tzivotechem. I took out your legions. We have a title called legions. Turn to the same chapter, verse 41. It becomes even stronger. Verse 41 on the same chapter, chapter 12, what does it say? After they settled in Egypt for 430 years, what does it say? Vayehi mikei shloishim shana ve'arba'mei shana. And it was at the end of 430 years. Be'etzem vayehi be'etzem hayom hazeh. And it was on that very day. Yatsu. Yatsu means went out. Kol tzivot Hashem. Mi'eret Mitzrayim. All the legions of God went out of the land of Egypt.
Why is 430 years repeated twice within a few words?
Good. A good question. A good question. Why is it repeated twice? A good question. I don't remember the answer now, but the commentaries are all commenting on it. But I'm looking on the title that we have. We are not just called your legions. Now we are even called Tzivot Hashem, the legions of God. That's our new name. In simple Hebrew, you would translate the army of God walked out. Again, we are soldiers. And later, on verse 51, again, at the end of almost the end of the Parsha, the last verse on chapter 12, Vayehi be'etzem hayom hazeh, it happened on that very day, Oitzi Hashem es bnei Yisrael mi'eret Mitzrayim, God took the children of Israel out of Egypt, al tzivot in their legions. In their legions. So we have this new title called legions. Even though, even last week, we already had a verse in chapter 7 when God told Moses that Paro is not going to hear you, and I'm going to take out Tzivotai, my legions, Israel, with great judgment, with plagues. But it's interesting that we are all called legions. What's the idea of being called legions, soldiers? So I'm going to talk a little bit about soldiers and what is the meaning of a soldier in Jewish um, tradition. We are approaching this weekend on the 10th of Shvat is the Yortzeit, the passing anniversary of passing of the previous Lubavitcher Rebbe, Rabbi Yosef Yitzchak. He passed actually away. It was actually on Shabbos, Parshas boy. It was not expected. He wasn't healthy and he was very weak, but no one was, expecting him to pass. He was fully functioning and leading the world. And that Friday, before he passed away, his son-in-law, which is our Rebbe, brought him a Hasidic discourse from the print shop, which was going to be published for this Shabbat. Because this Shabbat, the 10th of Shvat, was the previous Rebbe's grandmother's yahrzeit. And at that time, it was very difficult for him to speak. It was after a stroke, and people couldn't understand clearly the way he spoke. So they used to give out a printed Hasidic discourse related to the weak insights of Hasidic philosophy. The Rebbe, our Rebbe, was in charge on organizing the print sheet and editing the pamphlet, and he brought it to the previous Rebbe on Friday, left it on the table in front of him, which he was very pleased to receive it. The next morning, around 8 o'clock, he passed away. Our Rebbe took it that this is the final teaching that the previous Rebbe left us. That was their Shabbos. The teaching began on discussing a verse of Shir HaShirim, of the Song of Songs by King Solomon, which reads, Basi legani achoy sekalo, I came to my garden, my sister, my bride. And he discusses why is this world called the garden? Because this was the place that the Shekhinah, the divine presence, was there originally here before the sin of the tree of knowledge. And our mission is to bring God back into the world. Mainly it happened when we built the Mishkan, tabernacle. That was the initial stage of bringing the Shekhinah back into the reality of this world, like it says in the verse, make me a sanctuary and I will dwell in your midst, the Osuli Mikdash, the Shachanti Betocham, I will dwell amongst you. And the previous Rebbe discusses that we are actually responsible to make it happen. And that's why he says we are called the legions of God. Because we have the mission to fight this war against that which stands the opposite of holiness, of godliness. And for that we need soldiers. That's what happened when we left Egypt. We were introduced as soldiers, the legions, the tzivois. And then he also discusses that when it comes to war, especially a war which relates to the full victory against those who stand against the king is spending even the hidden treasures that was collected by his ancestors. Is he ready to spend for the victory of the war? And it talks what is a treasure, and it goes into Kabbalistic insight to describe what exactly is called a treasure of God, meaning what is there that God has that he never gave, and it does not reveal in the so-called natural course of creation, not even in miracles, but is spending it for the sake of victory. That's mainly that Hasidic discourse talks about. Very interesting Hasidic discourse has 20 chapters. And because of these 20 chapters, every year since 1950, when the previous Rebbe passed away, the Rebbe used to explain one chapter. 1970, the Rebbe finished explaining the final 20th chapter. Came 1971, he restarted again with a new and deeper insight, which went along till 1990. So anyway, this called in the Hasidim, it's known as the Basi Legani, because Basi Legani is the two words which initiates the Hasidic discourse. Basi Legani is King Solomon's words, I came to my garden. That's what it's called. If you go do a Google search, Basi Legani, this week you're going to find a lot of interesting talks and tales and insights, and all kinds of rabbis and Hasidic mentors who talk about what we can take from this Basi Legani. And God willing, we'll talk about it Shabbos here too. But in chapter 10 of Basi Legani, the previous Rebbe writes that a name of a soldier, talking about the allegiance of God, is called in Hebrew Chayal, so called Tzava. Has three different interpretations. The obvious and the simple one is what we call, when translated, armies. Tzava means the armies, which represent the soldiers, which they are given the job to accomplish a war. If we're talking the war of God, being the legions of God, which we are referred to in this Parsha, Tzivot Hashem, is basically to work like a soldier. How does a soldier do his work? What defines that soldier? A soldier doesn't use his own mind and his own ideas. A soldier is all about accepting rules, accepting authority, like orders. Taking orders. Exactly. That's what we call in Talmudic terminology. It's called Kabbalat Ol, accepting the yoke. Like you put a yoke on an ox. It's called accepting the yoke. Matter of fact, it's the second chapter of the first tractate of Talmud called Brachot that talks about Shema. So that says that the Shema comes before Ve'ayim Shomoa. Ve'ayim Shomoa means when you listen to my commandments, I'm going to bring you rain. If you're not listening, you're going to not have rain. The Mishnah says in Brachot chapter 2, why is Shema written before Ve'ayim Shomoa? And the Mishnah says, because first you need to accept the yoke of God. Ma Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad. After you take upon yourself God as your king, then we can take his orders, his commandments. It's called Kabbalat Ol. In Yiddish, there's an expression that the previous Rebbe says, a Yid is a Kabbalas Oilnik. A Kabbalas Oilnik is a Yid. A Jew is one who accepts the yoke of God. The one who accepts the yoke of God, he's a Jew. That's how it works. You go into the army, you're expected to put your mind on the side and commit and accept and follow orders, right? Soldiers. That's the simple meaning of the word Tzivot Hashem, the legions of God. That's what we are called in this week's Parsha. That we are soldiers. We have to march as soldiers. And a soldier, the Rebbe once said, a soldier, when he sleeps a soldier. When he eats a soldier. When he walks a soldier. You recognize there is a soldier. That's for the name we were given. Tzivos Hashem. But then there's another meaning for the word tzava. Not just army. It's interesting that there is a verse in the book of Job which talks about the general nature of the book of Job. Is trying to remind us that life is not a game. So better behave, do what you need to. That's what Job talks about. So he writes in the book of Job, says, chapter 7, Alo tzava le'enosh alei aretz. A person has a tzava in his life. And it means, it's being translated, you have a fixed amount of time that God gave you to live. Vekiyemei sachir yamav, your days are the days that you are hired for the job, and it doesn't last forever. And the commentaries explain that just like there is an army which marches together in order, so there is the army of time. It's and they march one after the other because that's how time runs. And that's what the biblical word for time and for the group of time is called tzava. In the book of Job, chapter 7, Allah tzava enosh alei yaret. So the previous Rebbe explains in that Maimer what is the connection between tzava being time and tzava being soldiers. It's very simple. You are called to fight, but don't think that you have all the time in the world. Don't push it off for tomorrow. You were given a group of time. You were designated, right? It was designated for you a number of years, hopefully many years, but there's a number of years that this is the time you're going to do your job. And once the time passes, it is too late. So opportunities that you can only do at the time when you can do those opportunities. There's a verse, and it gives you an extra fixed amount of days, and it says, fill it up for me. You're not going to get another day. The day that passed and you didn't fill it up is gone, right? So what's a real good soldier? What does he do? He's not just a soldier in the army of God, Tzivot Hashem, but he's also utilizing his tzava, his time, which again makes him deserve the name tzava. The water is boiled here. If anybody put it on, you want to go have a tea or hot water, don't be bashful. Go over and get it. In the meantime, I'm going to go get a Gemara.
So if the Kohanim would not be considered soldiers, they were a legion of their own. So does that what is meant by all your legions?
What do you
Because,
mean?
well, Kohanim didn't fight, did they?
We spoke about it last week, that the Levites did not fight, right?
So I'm just
2
saying,
weeks ago.
would the Kohanim be a separate legion?
Yeah, it's called actually the Kohanim are called the legion of the king. They have like an honorable state of being a legion of soldiers.
And you know the Romans call their armies legions.
Legions, that's right. Legion. The interesting Gemara, here the Frierdiker Rebbe brings a Gemara which gives us a third interpretation. Time. We know that we say every Shabbat, Mayim, start Kiddush, what do you say? Vayechulu Hashemayim v'yaretz v'chol tzva'am. What does it mean? And God concluded the work of Shamayim, of heaven, and earth, and Shamayim is heaven, and Eretz is earth, and then you say, V'chol tzva'am. What does V'chol tzva'am mean? What is V'chol tzva'am? So let's see what the Gemara says. Now you're going to learn another word in Kiddush. We're saying it so many years. At least now we're going to have a Talmudic understanding in that.
Hey, Rabbi, what Gemara? What Gemara?
Rosh Hashanah 11a.
Ah, thank you.
Okay. Says the Gemara, Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi. Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi said, Kol Maaseh Bereshis, regarding all the work of creation, Bekoimoso nivru. They were created with their full stature. Yes? They were created with their full statures, meaning they were fully mature. Ledaito nivru. They were created according to their will. So, not leave it for now. What do you mean according to their will? They were asked, and then they were already created. Let's leave it. But listen to that word. The tzivyonan nivru. They were created according to their tzivyon. One tzivyon means according to their character. According to the characteristics is how they were formed. And the Gemara says, how do we know it? How do we know that creation happened in full matured trees, full matured animals? Maybe they were little things that slowly grew and developed. What do you take it that it was all ready to march? Says the Gemara, because it says in the verse, "Vaychulu hashamayim ve'haaretz v'chol tzva'am," that the heavens and earth and all their tzva'am. What is tzva'am? So the Gemara, I'll teach you tzva'am ela tzivyonam. Their characteristics, their forms. That's what tzva'am means. Which is explained by Tosfot. Well, what kind of word is that tzva'am? Never heard it. It's a Hebrew word. So Tosfot, yes. Tzva'am is a word which is used in Tanakh for beauty. Something which is beautiful and has a good, nice appearance is called tzvi. Like Eretz Israel is called Eretz Tzvi, the land of the deer. The deer in general is like in Tanakh is attributed something representing fully developed, glorious, beautiful. So Tzivyonam, which is Tzava, doesn't mean army, doesn't mean time, but rather it means beautiful looking. The world was created beautiful looking. And when God calls us Tzivot Hashem, the army of God, what does it mean? That all our characteristics are developed, we are all strong and powerful and good looking and organized and ready to do the job. That's what Tzivyonah means. This is what Tzivyonah means. This is Sabah Melashon Tzivyon. So you have to understand when we speak about something looking beautiful, it's not only because it's matured and developed. Beauty in Torah language means something which is mixed of different colors. If you have something which is made of one color, even though it might be looking good, but we're not going to call it beautiful. Beautiful, called tiferet or glory, translated, is actually a mix of different colors.
Literally colors?
Colors, yeah, like a mix of white and brown and yellow and red and whatever. I'm not so artistic as I look, but yes, that's what Kabbalah always talks about, tiferet being the attribute of integrated attributes, meaning mixing with others. A little bit of kindness, a little bit of severity. A good mix is what we call beautiful. Is what we call pe'er. Is what we call nice. Is what we call good looking. And what happens is that the world was created in such good shape that we call it tzva'am, because with all its beauty. What was the beauty? The beauty was that they were not just matured, developed entities, but there was a world which was ready to integrate one to another, support to one another. They ate from the trees gave that, the animals gave that. Everybody gave his contribution, which created this beauty called tzva'am. So when we say vayichulu hashamayim ve'haaretz v'chol tzva'am, it means that God concluded the works of shamayim, heaven, aretz, earth, v'chol tzva'am, and all its creators, all its creatures in a mature, developed, and beautiful form. So basically, to summarize, when we say that we are called the Tzivot Hashem, the legions of God, or the army of God, it means that we are meant to be soldiers in an army, where the basis for being a proper soldier is following orders. It's called to be self-nullified for a greater general, and the soldier knows that every mission has a time frame. You don't just sit there and wait, for tomorrow or the day after tomorrow, mañana. There's no mañana. This is today. Today is the day, Zman, that we call Tzva Amiz. And at the same time, it is the type of work which is expected to work together. It can't be a soldier on my own and who cares what the other soldiers do. It has to be planned out properly, so it works with integration, but it means it works with a plan which everybody understands and include himself with the other. And you see by soldiers also, they're very, very strong, and we see it now in this present army. The guy helps it should come to an end already. In the present war in Israel, you hear stories constantly of soldiers trying to support other soldiers. I read it even this morning. Somebody sent me a short clip of a Israeli soldier explaining and like kind of praying that he hopes the unity that they experience should last. And he says, guys, you don't understand, this is weird, you don't understand what's going on with in Chanunas. I was forced to go home, and I know that my friend did not see his children for whatever X amount of time. And I was begging by him, please, you go. I will stay for you. You go instead of me. And he said, no, it's your turn. Who knows? Take advantage of your turn. Literally fighting between themselves to give each and every person the opportunity of enjoying and being sometime with his families or communities. And this is the tzivyon. This is the we speak, which is not just soldiers. To be successful in the war, you have to put yourself aside for another person too. This is the main idea of being a soldier. Previous rebels, the Shabbos, he actually relates that he was called to preziv. You know what preziv is? What do you call it? Preziv? Then you call to the army in Russia.
Призыв.
Preziv. Okay, did I say it right? It's the Russian word for being called to the army. So he was also called to the army. Everybody was called to serve for the Russian army. So
Called up.
yeah, he was called up.
Never have to.
So the previous Rebbe writes, and I was called to Prezi, and I was called to the army. My father told me there's a lot of very good stuff that we can learn in serving God by following the army. You can learn from them. You never, thank God, ended up serving, but he says there's a lot of things that you can learn from the army. And one of the first things he says, the idea of following orders.
To me, hearing about the Israeli army is they've got a lot of latitude to go out and carry out orders. Whereas in the Russian army and a lot of the communist countries, everything had to be passed down from the top, and it took forever, and it made for an ineffective fighting force.
Yeah, possibly. There's a lot of. We used to have in the community a general who was a general in the army. Very nice Jew. His name was Avram. Remembers that. Zelig Goldie was his name. A short Jew with wore like a beret, very sharp eyes, and he didn't want to start up with them. He was a very nice. I always say this story that it was in the first or second year, whatever, in the early years of the Torah Center. And I used to read from the Torah, and even till today, I'm expecting people to correct me if I make a mistake. I'm not looking to, I don't consider myself perfect, for sure not. And I want to make sure that the reading is done properly. So I expect people to correct me. And there was a visitor in the shul. We were a small group, a minyan maybe. And my brother-in-law from Seattle, Sefer, came to visit. And I asked him to stand next to me like I have till today, somebody standing and ensuring that I'm reading every word properly. And I made more than the amount of mistakes I made today with my early years. And as a yeshiva student, I never read publicly. So it was a new phenomenon for me. I will never forget this it wasn't so little, but this short, strong Russian Jew, general of the Russian army, gets up from his chair and he goes over to my brother-in-law. And he was short. He looks him up like this. You don't correct my rabbi nothing. Do Farkash the Rebbe Gornish, dear, like the Rebbe says, this is it. It was pretty scary. Anyway, so once he told me, was once Yom Kippur, I always say the story, Yom Kippur, was a much longer break than today, because if I would take my time in davening, I would be left with other minyan, or Musa for sure not. We used to go fast, but if you go fast, so then you have a longer break till Mincha. So after Musaf, we had like a good, maybe today we have what, an hour? Those days it was like at least a 3-hour break. Wow. So I took him home. I took him with another elderly friend, also the Moshe, to my house. I did 10, 15-minute walk. And we sat on the couch and we spoke. So I told Rav Zelig, tell me a little bit about the army, the fight, World War II, you were leading soldiers. And he tells me a little different than what you just said. He says, listen, we were fighting a big army, Germany, and we had not much. We gave them alcohol and they went to the fire. That was his words. So he gave them spirit. They went, they didn't know where they're going. They ran straight into the fire. That's how we ran the army. Anyway, the point is that the previous Rebbe says that his father actually told them that, you're going to the army, so you should know there's a lot we can learn from the army. I mean, not going, you're being called to the army, and we can learn from them. And he mentioned the idea that we learn of sacrifice. But the main thing that we learn is also the foundation of the army. The most important principle of the army is the fact that you put your mind on the side. You take orders. Kabbalah soil, accepting the yoke of God. That's what we learn from the army.
So that's when you said that people were newly married or there had other things that they couldn't follow those orders would let go.
Exactly.
Send home.
Exactly. Now, this is all what we are reading in the name and in the word Tzvaot, the way it relates to us people. But we also know that Tzvaot is a name of God. Right? We say in davening, Hashem Tzvaot Imanu. translates Tzvaot in English to happening. I think in English they say the God of hosts, right?
Which is another thing, allegiance, it's another army.
Who is the host? The angels. What?
Yeah,
Now, that name, it's one of God's names. Tzvaot is one of God's names. The interesting thing is that that name is not mentioned in the Chumash. It's a name which is mentioned by the prophet. I think the Gemara says that was Hannah was the first one who referred to God. The Gemara says that it was Hannah. Wait a second. Here, the beginning of the second chapter in Brachas, page 31b, since Bernard needs to know exactly what the page is. So here the Gemara says like this. The Gemara talks a lot about Hannah. And she made a vow, she didn't have any kids. We actually read about it every year on Rosh Hashanah. It says in this verse, so it says, Vatidoyer neder, Hannah made a vow, Vatomer, and she said, Hashem Tzvaot. Hashem, here they translate, Master of Legions. Rabbi Elazar, says the Gemara, from the day God created his universe, Lo haya Adam shekra'o la'kadosh baruch hu tzvaot. There was no man who called God Master of Legions, or God of Hosts, as it says in the Siddur. Ad sheba Chana, until Hannah is the mother of Samuel the prophet, and she was the wife of Elkanah, and she came vekukraoto tzvaot, and she is the one who called God Vatomer Hashem Tzvaot, God, Master of Legions. What says the Gemara? Omro Chano Lifnei HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Chano said before God, Rebbeinu Shalom, Master of the universe, Mikol Tzvoi Sheboroso Boilomcho, Koshe Beinecho Shetiten Li Ben Echad. From all the legions upon legions of creatures that you have created in your universe, is it difficult to you eyes to grant me one son? So she referred to God, Hashem Tzvois. You have a multitude of soldiers, so many legions upon legions, and they can't even give me one son. And the Gemara explains it even further. The Gemara compares it with this following analogy. Melech Basar Adam, there was a king, a human king, a king of flesh or blood, who made a feast for his servants. A feast. One poor person came and stood by the door. He said to them, please, tnuli prusa echad, give me one piece of bread. But no one paid attention. So he pushed his way and entered until he was in the proximity of the king. Amar lo, he said to the king, Adoni HaMelech, my lord the king, because seuda she'asiso kashe beinecho litim mipuso achas. The entire feast you have made, is it difficult in your eyes to give me one piece of bread? And that's what Hannah did. So Hannah was the one that actually was the first one, the Gemara says, that she referred to God with the name Tzvaot, because later in Tanakh, we find the name many times. The different prophets are turning to God with the name Tzvaot, till to the point that in our prayers, like we say, Hashem Tzvaot Imanu Mizgavanu Elokei Yaakov Sela, Hashem Elokei Tzvaot, right? We keep on finding the name Tzvaot in various times. Says the Rambam in chapter 6, we know that there is a very strong commandment of protecting God's names and not to destroy God's names, and not to say God's name, etc. The Rambam says, what are the names? So the Rambam says there are 7 names for God. There is a name which is written as Yud K Vav K. This is like the most important name. This is called like the explicit name. It's also written Adnei, Aleph, Dalet, Nun, Yud, Adai. That's name A. Name B is Aleph Lamed, K. I'm using K for A, okay? Number 3, Elokah. Number 4, Elokim. Number 5, Eloikei. Number 6, Shin Daled Yud. I'm using a K for the D, Shakai. And number 7, Tzvaot. The Rambam says, whoever erases even one letter from any of those 7 names is punished by life. So you clearly see clearly that the name Tzvaot is a name which is considered one of God's holy names. And what does Tzvaot mean? The God of the legions. What are we called? The legions. So we carry God's name in us, just as we are about to walk out of Egypt. We are sharing the same name, the God of legions. And why is it that we were given that name at that time? So simply because that's the time that we were given the full task to serve as God's soldiers. First of all, the physical war, Amalek, conquering Eretz Yisrael, the 7 nations. But mainly what we spoke earlier, what the previous Rebbe speaks about, is the spiritual war. A world which is polluted, mixed, very mixed bag of goodness and the opposite of goodness. It's called in Kabbalah, getting rid of this clipper, getting rid of this evil energies existing in the world. So God says, don't worry. It's not that you are my soldiers and I'm standing over. I am myself taking this name. I have the title. And even no one is calling me by the name, and it took many years until this lady, this woman, Hannah, she came and she actually called God, name God of hosts. And from here, by the way, a lot of things we learn from this Hannah. This Rebbe Hannah was not just, she was a big macher. The way we daven, Amida, is all from Hannah. We speak quietly, and our lips are moving, but we don't sound our voices. All comes from Hannah. People say, Jews don't look down on women, look down on women. Everything we know about prayer comes from a woman. She's the one who knows how to pray. They don't ever come to shul. They come late. Right, David?
I never look.
I know. They are tzaddik. But that's the point, to remember that we have Hashem's name with us. We are called Tzivos Hashem. If you are being called up or not, you are drafted by definition into the army of God. And there is no two options. We are meant to be victorious. There's no other option. We don't have any other option.
Failure is not.
Failure is not an option. But you have the strength too. Remember, Slois. God is Slois. We'll continue on Shabbos, God willing. Thank you. Have a good day, a good night.
Thank you very much.
You're very welcome. Enjoy your new title, Tzvaot. A new title. Carry it with stolz, with bravery, bravery. How are we doing?
Fine. Cold.
It's not so cold anymore. It was cold. Last week was colder. It's already less cold. Everybody okay there on Zoom?
Yes,
Yes,
Thank
thank you.
You learned something tonight?
always,
Always.
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 That's good. Bernard, you background looks like you're running one of the master, one of the great yeshivot in Israel or somewhere.
Yeah, here's the, follow along with you so I
Very
can read
good.
later too.
Very good. You confirming it. I don't make up this Talmudic statement,
No.
right?
No,
Okay, Doc, my friends. Have a wonderful good week. Keep warm. And Shabbos is the 10th of Shvat. Come to Shul, even those who don't usually come. We're going to daven, we're going to fabrei, we're going to have a kiddush in honor of the Rebbe's yahrzeit, the previous Rebbe's yahrzeit, and mainly what it means for us is the Rebbe became Rebbe. How can it be greater than that? And it's the 10 years anniversary since we walked into this shul, is this weekend, the 10th of Shvat.
Wow.
And visit us sometimes on Shabbos. You might enjoy it. But give it a try. What are you scared to enjoy something?
No, I don't have a good excuse.
Okay. You're honest guy. You're always honest. Good to see you. Laila Tov. I'll see you later.
not at all.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you too.